Hey, everyone out there in YouTube land, Dan here from GeekCast Radio doing another Marvel Fresh Start review. This, though, I'm actually continuing with a series. I reviewed Venom #1, gave my thoughts and opinions. You could check out that video. But today I'm going to be talking about the second issue. I feel like there's enough here that it warrants continuing conversation regarding the quality of this book and if it's living up to the promise of the first issue. And when I talked about the first issue, I did say this was very much a fresh start. In the sense, we have a new team coming on. Donny Cates is bringing a new voice, a new idea, delving into the history of Venom, the hidden history we weren't really knowing about. And this issue, in fact, is probably even more of a fresh start, oddly enough, than the first issue. This gets into the character of Rex Strickland and where he comes from. We got an introduction into him last issue. He kind of showed up and suddenly he's talking to Eddie and saying that he knows all these different things about the Venom symbiote that he doesn't. And this kind of gives us a little history of him and where he comes from. Like, we know he was a soldier, and we see his story and where it comes from, where he was, and I believe this was Vietnam, and how he became to know the symbiote and what it did to him and his fellow soldiers. So a lot of really kind of backtracking just to set us up with, exposition that's well executed. What I did really like about this opening, though, was that it got into Eddie Brock and just gave us a little synopsis of who he is and what he did, and where he's come from, like the beginnings of Eddie Brock, how he and Venom have kind of come together. It's a great little snippet here of just kind of their story. And I'm hoping that it gets deeper and we get more into the character of Eddie Brock. We got a little bit in the first issue, a little bit more here. That Eddie Brock's always been a character that it's just been defined by his relationship to Peter Parker or Spider-Man, or just because he looks cool. There hasn't really been, I think, a lot of development of him as a person all that much, in the sense of kind of getting back to his motivations. What makes him so inclined to want this Venom symbiote? Why does he hate Peter Parker as much as he does outside? What brought him to that? What drives him? And I'm hoping that Donny Cates gets into that. This touches upon it. It gives us some hints here and there. But again, the Rex Strickland is really the focal point here. Ryan Stegman's art continues to be great. It is very dark, as you would expect for a Venom book. What I liked about the pages of the war flashbacks is the coloring of the pages does differ. I think it really differentiates the past and the present rather well. The coloring gets a little has a little different feel to it, which I think is helpful to kind of just establish itself. And compared to something like this, the present day, I think it's a good way to kind of juxtapose the past with what's happening now. And still, we see Eddie struggling with the symbiote. The symbiote seems to be going crazier and crazier. We get more glimpses of the crazy symbols that has been on his head and what that means, speaking that language, that alien language. And there seems to be some darker underbelly of the symbiotes that we're not aware of. We see how they seem to be connected to the universe in some ways that we did not know before. It seems like they were there from the beginning and they've always been there. Somehow government got across them, and now we have these crazy soldiers. This does a really good job of building you up to a point, and then you feel the craziness of what's happening underneath. As this flashback's occurring, we know things are going insane. We get some newscasts to kind of explain what's happening, and by the last page, it's like, oh wow, things are getting real. Things are happening. It's upping the ante like I expect from a Donny Cates book. I think he's a person that, as a writer, really goes for it and goes big right out of the gate. He doesn't really slow down in a way. We saw that with Thanos. It was just got bigger and bigger and more epic and more epic. I do wonder, with Thanos, it was a limited run, so it was only 6 issues or so. I know Donny Cates has indicated he has a longer run here, so it might be more challenging to keep up that pace. But as I said, I hope that a way he gets around it is by looking at the character of Eddie Brock and developing him further and kind of getting more into his history, along with all this different symbiote history that we're learning. That piece to me is interesting. It's cool to see him come up with these different ideas and the approach to it. But ultimately, I got to care more about the character of Eddie Brock. It's one that I've never really cared that all much for. I like Venom when he shows up here and there, how when he might pop up in the Spider-Man book or something like that. But I've never really stayed consistent with Venom series, because the character of Eddie Brock has never really, seen one to me that was all that engaging outside of looking cool. We'll see now, and I trust Donny Cates as a writer. He's proven that he can, put out some great books, with God Country, with Thanos, with Doctor Strange. I do like to see him, though, sustain that with a title for, more than like 12, 13, 14 issues. He's doing that with Baby Teeth now. I think that's up to 13 or so. But he's mentioned that he has like years upon, 20, 30 issues, in his mind already for where he wants to take this. And I got to say, if that's the case, I'm curious to see where this goes, because it's really kind of out the gates, big and bold. So it definitely catches the interest. But if you're a person who's like never really liked Venom and never really cares for the character, I will say maybe try the first issue of Venom, because I'm right there with you, and he sold me on it. So I think any character can yield a good story with the right team behind it. And Ryan Stegman right now and Donny Cates seem to be a good team. So, but yeah, that's it for me. I'll probably continue to do these reviews of these specific issues as long as I feel like there's enough to talk about. And I felt like this one was the case. You can check out my review of the previous issue as well as some of the other Marvel Fresh titles. I'm at least reviewing every first issue. And if I feel like I can continue with it because I like it, or because there's something there to discuss, I'll keep going with it. But how have you been enjoying Marvel Fresh Start? If you've been reading it, has it caused you any more interest to pick up Marvel books, or maybe wait for the trade? I'm seeing how good of a effect this actually has. I will say, for me, I thought that they've actually been putting out much better books with this relaunch. And even though it's not technically a relaunch, they've had a lot of great, exciting creative teams. I think with the right people in the right places. Not every book has worked for me at every single level, but I think more positive than negative by far. So if you're a person who's given up on Marvel, maybe give them another chance. I know they like to renumber things and you do a lot of gimmicky things, and they sometimes shoot themselves in their own foot. But I got to say, the creative teams here put on some great work with Venom, with Thor, with Doctor Strange, even kind of. So I'm excited to see where this is going. We have Tony Stark Iron Man coming up. We have a new Spider-Man team coming up. It seems like this is Fantastic Four eventually. So I think Marvel is really, with their new CEO, looks like they're in a good spot. But if you want to hear more from me, you can do that by subscribing to this channel, checking out my podcast, Comic Concierge. Try to release podcasts every Monday and Wednesday, and daily videos as much as we can do. But thanks for listening, and remember that comics are for everyone. The key is finding the right one. Until next time, thanks for watching. Watching, not listening, because you're watching. Maybe you're just listening. It's your choice, really.